Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Recreant Journals. I'm your host, the Recreant. I have a question for you. Have you ever browsed the dark web? The Recreants in today's story sure have. And so, without further ado, let's take a listen. While randomly clicking around on an old website called Tor one night, I discovered a site with a riddle, text box, and puzzles. Being my young, 15, not very keen self, I continued answering riddle after riddle, solving puzzle after puzzle. Admittedly, I was enjoying the experience, and in an hour, I had gotten quite far, when suddenly, a message popped up. I decided to click on it, and I saw a picture of a decapitated pig's head on a plate with big bold red letters, asking, "Do you want to see your prize?" I want to say at this point that I closed down my computer or something, but like I said, I was a stupid 15-year-old with no real sense of internet safety. So, I clicked the bold bloody red text, where I was then entered into another dark screen in a chat room. The screen stayed dark and blank for another 30 seconds when suddenly a text box appeared asking me for my name. I made up one and entered it. The person then replied with a laughing emoji and said, "No, Cameron, be truthful. You're among friends here." My blood ran cold as I hastily tried to exit the chat room. More text appeared in big bold red text saying, "It's okay, Cameron. You're too young to enter our guild, but I'll be sending you your prize." I hastily unplugged my charger to the computer, yet the screen was still on. All that played was just this ominous song with a picture of Alice in Wonderland and the decapitated pig's head on the screen. I want to say that was the end of it, but literally, a few days later, while at the dinner table with my mom and sister, I noticed my dad outside talking to a police officer. They were holding a box. About an hour or two later, my father in the most concerned and worried voice told us that we would be moving in to another apartment within a couple of weeks. I never figured out why, but one thing I do know is please stay off the deep web. My life was ruined by this event. All my friends, family that I had in the one area we stayed were gone as we moved miles away from where we used to stay. Just goes to show you that the dark web is no place for a kid. Before I get into my story, I like to point out that the dark web is largely harmless. The more wild, crazy parts of it can be found mostly by those seeking them out. Anyway, about my experience. Let me say I'm a 27-year-old, and this takes place when I was 25. I had just moved into an apartment complex with my friend who we'll call Justin. Now, Justin was an antisocial, computer nerd, but he was my homie, and very chill. Despite his love for games, he never let it stop him from paying his responsibilities, which is why I enjoyed moving in with him. Thus, one day, I recall Justin was late on his computer one night. I asked him if he was okay, and he told me he was browsing the dark web. Intrigued by this, I asked him what was he doing, or what has he seen? Anything crazy? To which he replied, "No, not yet." Justin then went on to elaborate on how he could buy things unreleased yet in the US and for a lower price. Things such as guns, drugs, and most importantly for him, video games. I watched for a while as he searched, and soon he came upon a webpage selling an entire list of items. We winded up getting a few grams of weed, a pistol, and the new COD game. Just like that, Justin closed his computer and casually went to bed. That happened on a Thursday, I believe, and by Saturday, Justin had all our items, like they were all personally delivered. I admit, it was crazy. We hadn't paid a whole lot of money for them, and the items were in good quality, and they arrived incredibly fast. Now, I know you're wondering, so how did this become horrifying? Well, things were fine for a couple of weeks, as we ordered from the site quite regularly. However, I began to notice Justin spending loads of time watching and playing Call of Duty, I imagined. So, I tried not to think much of it. However, when he moved his computer into his room and began keeping the door locked throughout the night, I got a bit worried. One night, Justin, though, left his door slightly creaked open as I heard him go into the bathroom. I wanted to know what was on that computer and what had him so captivated. Call me nosy, but as I entered the room, I saw a paused video of a girl giving a man a helping hand. I thought to myself, geez, that girl looks incredibly young, when I turned around to see Justin staring at me. I said, bro, you can't stay up fapping all night. Get some sleep. I mean, after all, you got work in the morning. I then strolled out of his room as Justin stared at me. I did find this weird, but the next day, while Justin was at work, we got a knock on the door. I, without thinking, opened it. To my surprise, stood a very large man with greasy hair and a dirty coat. He asked, "Was Justin here?" To which I replied, "No, he's at work." The man then, I noticed, kept looking around and behind me, and I asked, "Can I help you with something?" To which the man said, "Sure, I'll be back tonight at 8. Pass it on to your friend. Tell him Doug stopped by." With that, the man proceeded to leave. As I watched the man walk away, I couldn't help but get this unnerving feeling by the man, like my life was in danger. After this, I decided to immediately text Justin, and I was very concerned. I remember asking him, who was that guy? How did he know him? And how the hell did he find where we live? Justin replied, about 10 minutes later, asking me, what did I tell him? I said nothing. Only, you were at work. Did you tell him where? I replied, of course not, no. I asked again, who was that guy? And is everything okay? Justin told me yes, and he said he'd see me when he got off. Fast forward to 5:30 that evening. I got a call from my mom, and then a text saying, turn on Channel 8 News. When I did, I saw a shooting had taken place at a Best Buy. A suspect was seen fleeing the scene, and in my horror, I noticed that it was the man from earlier, Doug. I hastily tried to call Justin as I began tearing up, but the unthinkable had already happened. Justin had been killed on his way to his car. Details are sketchy, but witnesses say the man shot him point blank after a brief argument. In the coming days, police took Justin's computers and I was brought in for loads of questioning. I told them about our dark web purchases, Justin's time on there, all the way to Doug's visit. To make things more terrifying, I learned Justin was involved in child porn marketing. It all began to make sense. The night I caught him, the stares, the awkwardness, everything. And to make matters worse, Doug was never caught, at least not to my knowledge. I was forced to then get a new roommate, and this eventually really set me back. All the counseling in the world wasn't going to bring my friend back. And I wish that I did something more, something different. And maybe my friend will still be here to this day. It just goes to show you, be careful on the dark web.